Company! Forward! Right!
When the British flag was raised over Nigerian soil, it was meant to signal control, authority, empire, but what it truly ignited was resistance. From the royal courts of the Benin Kingdom to the powerful emirates of the Sokoto Caliphate. From the markets of Aba to the streets of Lagos, Nigerians refused to surrender their identity, their culture, and their future without a fight. Some picked up weapons, some raised their voices in protest. Others fought with ideas, newspapers, and political movements. Resistance was not one battle. It was generations of defiance, armed uprisings, spiritual rebellion, women-led revolts, labor strikes, and nationalist campaigns that shook the foundations of British rule. In this episode, we uncover the untold story of how Nigerians resisted colonial domination, how ordinary people and extraordinary leaders challenged one of the most powerful empires in history, and how their courage paved the way for independence. This is the story of defiance. This is the story of resistance. Before British rule was enforced with laws and soldiers, it arrived quietly through trade, religion, and diplomacy. In the early centuries of contact, European merchants came to the shores of what is now Nigeria seeking palm oil, ivory, and other goods. Missionaries followed, establishing churches and schools, introducing Western education and Christianity to local communities. At first, these interactions appeared commercial and cooperative. But beneath the surface, a larger imperial ambition was unfolding. By the late 19th century, Britain had shifted from trade to territorial control. The Berlin Conference of 1884 to 85 formalized European claims over African lands, and Britain moved swiftly to consolidate its influence across Nigerian territories. Through treaties, many signed under pressure or misunderstanding, local rulers unknowingly ceded authority to the British Crown. What began as commercial agreements soon became political domination. In 1900, Britain officially declared the Protectorate of Northern Nigeria and the Protectorate of Southern Nigeria. These regions were administered separately, each governed according to British interests. Then, in 1914, the British merged both territories into one administrative unit under the amalgamation of Nigeria. To govern such a vast and diverse land, the British introduced a system known as indirect rule. Rather than completely dismantling traditional institutions, colonial authorities ruled through existing leaders. This decision, made without consulting the diverse ethnic and cultural groups within the territory, laid the foundation for modern Nigeria, but also created tensions that would echo for generations. Emirs in the north, Obas in the west, and warrant chiefs in the east. In theory, this preserved local customs. In practice, it altered power structures, elevated certain individuals, and disrupted long-standing systems of accountability. In northern regions once under the Sokoto Caliphate, indirect rule was relatively easier to implement because centralized emirate systems already existed. But in places like Igbo communities, where governance was decentralized and based on councils of elders, the British imposed warrant chiefs, individuals often lacking traditional legitimacy. This created resentment and instability. Taxes were introduced, forced labor policies followed. Local economies were reshaped to serve British industrial needs, prioritizing cash crops like cocoa and groundnuts over subsistence farming. Railways and ports were built not primarily to develop Nigeria, but to extract resources efficiently. What the British saw as administrative efficiency, many Nigerians experienced as exploitation and disruption. Cultural systems were undermined, political autonomy weakened, and economic independence threatened. But colonial control did not go unchallenged. Across regions, ethnic groups, and social classes, dissatisfaction grew. From royal courts to village squares, murmurs of resistance began to rise. The stage was set not for passive submission but for defiance. As British control tightened across Nigeria, resistance did not remain silent. In many regions, opposition took the form of armed struggle. Kings, warriors, and ordinary citizens chose to confront colonial forces directly, defending their sovereignty with courage and determination. One of the most dramatic clashes occurred in 1897 with the fall of the Benin Kingdom. When British officials attempted to expand their control and interfere in Benin's political affairs, tensions escalated. After a British delegation was attacked, the empire launched what became known as the Benin Punitive Expedition. Heavily armed British troops invaded Benin City, looted priceless artworks, and exiled the Aba. Though the kingdom was ultimately overpowered, the resistance demonstrated that Nigerians would not surrender their authority without a fight. In the north, the powerful emirates that once formed part of the Sokoto Caliphate also resisted British encroachment. The Caliphate had been a dominant Islamic state with structured governance and military organization. When British forces moved to assert control in the early 1900s, battles erupted across cities like Kano and Sokoto. Though superior British weaponry eventually secured victory, the resistance showed the determination of northern leaders to defend their religious and political autonomy. Elsewhere, resistance spread across Yoruba territories. While internal conflicts had already weakened some states, local rulers and warriors still opposed British interference. Skirmishes, ambushes, and localized uprisings challenged colonial advances, even if they lacked the centralized coordination to repel the empire entirely. In the Niger Delta, economic resistance often turned violent. Communities that depended on trade rejected British monopolies and taxation. Leaders organized attacks against colonial outposts, protesting policies that threatened their livelihoods. These confrontations were not random acts of aggression, they were deliberate efforts to protect economic independence. However, British military superiority, advanced firearms, organized battalions, and naval support proved overwhelming. By the early 20th century, most large-scale armed resistance had been crushed. Kingdoms were dismantled, rulers deposed, and territories absorbed into colonial administration. Yet defeat in battle did not mean surrender of spirit. The early wars revealed something powerful. Nigerians valued their sovereignty deeply. Even when outmatched militarily, they resisted domination with bravery and conviction. As guns and swords failed to expel the British, resistance began to evolve. The struggle would move from battlefields to marketplaces, from palaces to printing presses. The fight was far from over, it was simply changing form. When armed resistance was crushed by superior British firepower, the struggle did not end, it simply changed shape. If guns could not defeat the empire, culture, faith, and identity would become new battlegrounds. Across Nigeria, resistance began to unfold in quieter but equally powerful ways. British colonial rule did not only impose political control, it also attempted to reshape Nigerian society. Western education, Christianity, new dress codes, and foreign administrative systems were introduced as symbols of civilization. Traditional beliefs were labeled primitive. Indigenous authority structures were questioned, but many Nigerians refused to abandon their heritage. In the former territories of the Benin Kingdom, cultural pride remained strong even after the exile of the Aba. Rituals continued, festivals were preserved. Artisans quietly maintained ancient bronze casting traditions, protecting symbols of identity that colonial forces had attempted to suppress. Culture became resistance. Among Yoruba communities once connected to the Oyo Empire, traditional rulers maintained spiritual and cultural authority despite colonial oversight. While British officials governed politically, kings and chiefs still commanded deep respect in religious and customary matters. This dual structure allowed indigenous identity to survive beneath colonial administration. Religion also became a powerful tool of resistance. While Christianity spread rapidly, many Nigerians formed independent African churches rather than submit entirely to European control. These churches blended Christian teachings with African leadership and local customs, asserting spiritual independence. Worship became not just an act of faith, but a statement of dignity and autonomy. In the north, regions formerly under the Sokoto Caliphate preserved Islamic scholarship and legal traditions. Though politically subdued, religious institutions remained influential, safeguarding identity and intellectual continuity. Islamic schools continued teaching Quranic studies, reinforcing a sense of cultural resilience. Language, too, became resistance. Indigenous languages thrived in homes, markets, and storytelling traditions. Proverbs, folktales, and songs passed down values that colonial textbooks could not erase. Elders ensured that children understood their lineage, customs, and communal responsibilities. Even everyday acts wearing traditional attire, celebrating festivals, respecting ancestral rites became subtle declarations that colonial domination would not define Nigerian identity. Resistance was no longer fought only with weapons, but with preservation. By defending culture and faith, Nigerians protected the foundation of their society. And from this cultural confidence would emerge a new, more organized form of resistance. One that would challenge British rule not just spiritually, but politically. The battlefield was shifting once again, this time to newspapers, classrooms, and public rallies. By the early 20th century, resistance in Nigeria had evolved into something more organized, strategic, and politically sophisticated. A new generation of educated Nigerians, teachers, lawyers, journalists, and clerks began to challenge British rule not with swords but with speeches, newspapers, and political movements. Western education, originally introduced to strengthen colonial administration, produced an unintended consequence: a class of Africans who understood British political systems and demanded equal rights within them. These elites questioned discriminatory policies, protested unfair taxation, and criticized the lack of African representation in government. One of the earliest organized political groups was the Nigerian National Democratic Party, founded by Herbert Macaulay in 1923. Based in Lagos, the party advocated for greater African participation in governance and challenged colonial policies through elections and public campaigns. Though its influence was initially limited to the coastal regions, it marked a turning point, the beginning of formal nationalist politics in Nigeria. Newspapers became powerful tools of resistance. Publications such as the West African Pilot, founded by Nnamdi Azikiwe, criticized colonial injustice and inspired national consciousness. Through bold headlines and fiery editorials, journalists exposed discrimination, economic exploitation, and racial inequality. The printed word stirred public debate and connected diverse ethnic groups under a shared desire for self-determination. Student unions and professional associations also joined the movement. Graduates returning from Britain and other parts of the world brought new political ideas, including self-governance and Pan-Africanism. They argued that if Britain valued democracy at home, it could not deny it abroad. Public rallies and petitions demanded constitutional reforms and greater representation. The British responded cautiously, introducing limited reforms such as the Clifford Constitution of 1922 and later constitutional conferences. While these reforms expanded African participation slightly, they fell short of true self-rule. Yet, each concession strengthened nationalist resolve. Political resistance was no longer regional, it was becoming national. Leaders from the North, West, and East began engaging in discussions about unity and independence. Though ethnic differences remained, a shared frustration with colonial control created common ground. The struggle had moved from isolated uprisings to coordinated political pressure. Nigerians were no longer merely reacting to colonial rule, they were actively shaping the conversation about their future. And as political awareness spread, resistance reached the streets, markets, and workplaces, ordinary citizens. Women, workers, and traders would soon transform nationalism into a mass movement that the British could no longer ignore. By the mid-20th century, resistance to British colonial rule in Nigeria was no longer confined to elites, royal courts, or newspaper offices. It had become a mass movement. Ordinary Nigerians, women, workers, students, farmers were now at the forefront of the struggle. The demand for freedom was no longer whispered in private meetings. It echoed in marketplaces, streets, and labor unions across the country. One of the most powerful early examples of mass resistance was the Aba Women's War of 1929. Thousands of Igbo women mobilized against unfair taxation and the abuse of power by warrant chiefs. They organized protests, sang defiant songs, and confronted colonial authorities directly. Though the uprising was met with violence, it forced the British to reassess aspects of their administrative policies. The women's movement demonstrated that resistance was not limited by gender, it was a national cause. Labor unions also became engines of defiance. Railway workers, miners, and civil servants organized strikes demanding better wages and working conditions. These strikes disrupted colonial economic operations and revealed the vulnerability of British administration. When workers refused to cooperate, the machinery of empire slowed down. Economic resistance proved just as powerful as political activism. Meanwhile, nationalist leaders intensified their campaigns. Figures like Nnamdi Azikiwe, Obafemi Awolowo, and Ahmadu Bello built regional political parties that mobilized widespread support. They traveled across the country, delivering speeches that inspired unity and national consciousness. Though they represented different regions, the shared objective of self-rule became increasingly clear. Constitutional conferences in London and Lagos throughout the 1940s and 1950s gradually expanded Nigerian participation in governance. Each negotiation brought the country closer to autonomy. Pressure from local activism combined with global shifts after World War II, where colonialism was increasingly criticized worldwide. Britain could no longer justify holding on to its colonies indefinitely. Finally, on October 1, 1960, Nigeria achieved independence. The British flag was lowered, and a new nation stepped forward onto the global stage. The victory was not the result of a single battle or leader, but of generations of resistance-armed warriors, cultural defenders, political activists, market women, and striking workers. The story of how Nigerians resisted British colonial rule is a testament to resilience, unity, and determination. It reminds us that freedom is rarely given freely, it is demanded, defended, and earned. And in Nigeria's case, it was achieved through courage that spanned decades. If you want more of these stories, kindly subscribe and give your thoughts in the comments section below. See you in the next video.